Hello, everyone. Welcome. So we are here to talk about the status of fundraising in the AI era. Awesome. I see the chat popping off already. Yay. Just to let everyone know, this is going to be a very interactive session. We want you in the chat. We want you going back and forth and chatting with each other and chatting with us. We have a few questions throughout, but also if you have any other questions, we may have time for a Q&A. I'm not quite sure yet. So please just put anything in the chat. But before we do that, I'm going to go through a little bit of housekeeping. So the audio for your webinar is being broadcast through your computer speakers. If you have any issues, like any audio issues, any technical issues, go ahead and refresh your browser, and that should solve any issues. A recording of this session and all of the other sessions for BB Dev Days will be available after this session. And you can also download the slides from this doc, as well as the report that we'll be referencing from the slides from this presentation and the report in the Docs tab of Goldcast on the right side of your screen. Please use the Q&A to submit questions. But again, the chat is for group conversations, and we're going to be doing a lot in chat. Please keep that open and be ready to interact with one another. And with that spirit in mind, awesome, thanks, Eric. Just dropped a link to the report here as well. We would love to know where you're joining us from. And I know you've probably answered that question a few times over the course of BB Dev Days. So we also want to know what you wish people knew about your state or region, maybe some misconceptions. My name is Kate Averitt Anderson. I am the Blackbaud Institute Research and Publications Lead. The Blackbaud Institute is our original research lab here at Blackbaud. And I am joining you from Asheville, North Carolina, really Candler, North Carolina, which is in the boonies a little bit past Asheville, but nobody knows where that is. And I think, you know, what Sam and I were talking about Appalachia before we came on, and I wish everybody knew about like the deep spirit of community that we have. Like, I think people might be aware of it, but it is mind-blowing how close Appalachia is to one another and how much we support each other, and that is my soapbox. So with that in mind, I'll pass things over to my two other fellow speakers, Lori and Sam, to introduce themselves.
Thanks, Kate. Hi, I'm Lori. I'm the director of the Blackbaud Institute. I am based in the Bay Area, Oakland to be specific. I think something I'd love for people to know about where I live, people know about the natural beauty of the Bay. But most people don't actually realize that the beautiful redwood forests actually extend all the way down to the bay. So we can go hiking in the redwoods just a couple of minutes from my house, which is in the middle of busy, bustling Oakland. So if you ever want a place to visit that has it all, come visit us in the East Bay, especially Oakland.
And hey, everybody, I'm Sam Venable. I'm the Senior Product Manager in the Data Intelligence team. I am based in Franklin, Tennessee, and I'll take a little bit of a counter perspective. I wish fewer people knew about how lovely Nashville was, although it's been great and very welcoming. We've had a huge influx of people, so it's been kind of crazy, but it's a lovely place to be. It was kind of interesting. I was looking at a map. If you kind of draw a very slightly diagonal line, we're all pretty much in line with each other. So, but great to be with you all today.
You can send some of those Nashville people to Asheville, because I think people sometimes
Fair enough.
The wrong city. So we'll take them with open arms. Great. So I'll set out a little bit of what we'll be discussing today. We are talking about a recent report from the Blackbaud Institute, the status of fundraising in the AI era, and we're going to tackle that under three different topics. So we're first going to talk about what we found related to digital maturity and performance, a little bit about tech adoption and opportunities that fundraisers are seeing across the sector. And then, of course, we're going to take a big deep dive into AI, which will be the majority of today's session. So the report itself that I keep referencing comes from a survey of about 550 US nonprofit and education professionals. If you were one of those who took this survey, there might be some of you here and you're comfortable, please pop in the chat. I'd love to know. And thank you to everyone who took part in this. We surveyed a group of these fundraisers in a lot of kind of cross-functional roles. Anyone who works within education and nonprofit knows you probably wear a lot of hats. Really to gain a snapshot of like what growth looks like in the sector right now and the key drivers of success. And we also really wanted to understand what the relationship was between revenue performance, digital maturity, and AI. Of course, we're moving into this new era fundraising and of social impact. And so we wanted to get kind of a pulse check, a peer-to-peer pulse check of what that looks like for fundraisers. And again, you can download the full report on the doc section or through the link that Eric has shared in the chat. So we'll get started with this conversation about digital maturity. But before we do, I want to both ground us in about digital maturity and also open this up to you all in the chat. So if you want to take a second and think about how you would rate your organization's digital maturity on a scale of 1 to 10. That could be, and really we're talking about the organization as a whole or kind of within your department and your functional role. We defined a digitally mature organization as one in which technologies are integrated across areas, including fundraising, service delivery, supporter and student and internal processes. So if you're comfortable and you want to go in the chat to rate yourself between 1 and 10. Yes, and so while everyone's thinking about that and putting that in the chat, this is a great question about Canada. This is just the US report. This comes from a series of reports that we did across the US, Canada, the UK and Ireland, and Australia and New Zealand. So those are all available. If you actually go to the website, you'll be able to find some links over to those, but they're available through our regional sites. And actually, we can share some of those within the chat as well further down the line. Okay, some things numbers come in. 7, 3, 3 to 4, 5, about a 4 out of 10. Yeah, of course. Glad to share that. And thanks for that question about the regional reports. Oh, we have an 8. Yosef, I want to learn more about what y'all are doing. That's exciting. So keep bringing those in, and I will share a little bit about what we found with the group that we did survey. So if you rank yourself between a 0 to a 4, you're kind of sitting at that below average level. The average that we found within the study was a 5.5. And then anything above a 7 is what we're talking about. We talk about these above average digital maturity organizations. But if you're about a 5 or a 6, you are smack dab in the middle, average, right alongside a lot of your peers. And so here's what we found as it relates to digital maturity, that there is a link between digital maturity and overall revenue performance. So we found that organizations that have that below average digital maturity are less likely to report revenue growth, and they're more likely to report revenue declines, which to us tells a little bit of a story about how you're able to utilize your technology within your revenue growth spaces within fundraising. And I'll pass things to Lori for a little bit more color on this as well.
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's important for us as we're putting these numbers in the chat and maybe comparing ourselves to what we see here and seeing this note around increased fundraising revenue from organizations that are seeing themselves as both digitally average and digitally mature. This is not a scientific measurement of digital maturity. This is as we just saw in the chat, self-reported perspective on digital maturity. And so we're seeing both people's perceptions on how digitally mature they are, and also how much learning they believe they have to do left and how much growth opportunity there is for them. This is one of the reasons we think we see about equal performance between average and mature organizations, is because in those average organizations or folks defining themselves as average, they're likely observing a lot of growth opportunities that they want to go harness. There's also a risk for some of the organizations that are defining themselves as quite digitally mature, that with that self-defined scale, there might be opportunities for them to grow that they are less energetic about pursuing because they are seeing themselves as further along in the scale. So just an important note that this particular metric in the report is about how people see themselves and their organizations as much as it is about how their organizations are actually performing. The income performance, however, those are actual metrics of their income performance. It's not perception on income performance, it's did you actually hit your goals or not.
And to answer, Noah, your question on was organization size measured in relation to digital maturity, it was. So if you go into the full report itself, we dive into that as well, because I think there is a lot, thank you, Laura, for bringing the Canada report. There there is a lot here about resourcing as well, and how you perceive and the realities of the size of your organization and the kinds of digital maturity that you can reach. So we're not going to be able to get into that really in depth here, but I definitely encourage you to check out the report for more on that. And again, this is what we're looking at, that more digitally mature organizations are primed to make the most of their resources, was another thing that we found. So 44% of those organizations who identified as below average within that digital maturity scale attributed that to their growth to their team being adequately resourced. So again, we're seeing this correlation between revenue growth, digital maturity, and the ability to adequately resource your team, which kind of ties all different elements of the same story. And they're at 44% as opposed to 35% for total organizations, which is what you see within this drivers of income growth here. Exceptional gifts sit at the very top of those drivers of income growth for organizations overall. And I also wanted to call out quickly the statistic for the number 3 driver of income growth was that supporters were giving more. We found in 2024 from the Blackbaud Institute philanthropic data set that the individual gift average reached a record high of $937, with overall and online giving increasing approximately 2% year over year. This maps with the same time frame that we asked fundraisers about. So those organizations that are driving revenue growth are able to really tap into this upward trend in individual giving amounts and being able to make the most of that.
Yeah. One, just kind of observation too, as we were looking through and thinking about the data, is that of the 4 factors here, where more than 30% of the respondents indicated, these drivers of income growth, the only one that's sort of really from an internal posture perspective has to do with team resourcing internally, right? And I think there's things that organizations can do to really help improve this. Part of it's thinking about where you want to prioritize work, where you want to prioritize the investment for your organization. There's also a story, I think, about technology and the role that it plays in sort of that perception of being adequately resourced. And we see that, to Kate's point, in the delta between organizations who felt that they were in a high digital maturity category, that they were about 9 points higher than those other organizations. So, I think it kind of points for me that the vibe's important. How you're feeling about the organization, I think impacts maybe the perception of where you are from a resourcing standpoint. And, it also points out that maybe that digital maturity is lending itself to a sense that, these organizations are better positioned from a resourcing perspective to tap into the potential.
Mm-hmm. And so when we look at the flip side of this, again, we see that when we look at drivers of income decline, not being adequately resourced sits at the very top there. And that's then right below that, the economic environment, which of course, impacts across the board. So Sam, what advice would you have related to those who are in decline?
Yeah, I think it doubles down on that observation from the previous slide, right? It's that sense of how we can extend our team's capabilities. One of the things in my own experience that a lot of organizations, even in organizations that I worked for, right, in the past, didn't really think about the time cost, right? We make choices in our day-to-day work about where we're investing our time and energy, and there's an actual cost to that. And in my own experience years ago, we were looking at, do we build sort of a solution in-house to deal with some reporting and predictive modeling capabilities that we wanted to bring? And it was like, we sat down and said, we could build something like this, but it's going to take us 3 or 4 years. So how do we get to an accelerated state and look at the time cost of that development relative to kind of the opportunity cost of purchasing a new solution, but then opening up that potential to really double down and invest in areas where we felt like our attention was better suited. So, I think that's just kind of an important consideration. Again, technology provides, I think, a really excellent opportunity to drive that increased investment and be able to capitalize on more of, opportunities for income increases, really deepening and extending the relationships with your constituencies.
Mm-hmm. That is a perfect transition into our next section, where we're looking at specifically, how are organizations, as they navigate these resourcing challenges, as they're navigating differing digital maturity, the adoption of new technologies, how are they adapting? And then what opportunities do they see as some biggest areas of growth? So as we move into this, I'm going to push a little poll to you all. And we are asking, in your organization, do you tend to be early adopters? Do you tend to be average adopters, late adopters, or adoption averse? And then I know for a lot of people, it also depends on the technology. And then if you have any additional context you want to add to this in the chat, I would love to hear it. I know I worked at a nonprofit for many, many years, and we were very small. We were a team of 3. And so talking about adequate resourcing, we were doing the best with what we had. But when it came to technology adoption, we had to be very strategic in what we took the time for change management on. And so it very much depended on the technology and how it would assist us. So I understand that perspective as well. Yeah, and also just bringing out, Eric's perspective, how do you view yourself in your org? Do you feel like, this would be great to hear in the chat, do you feel like you are really like an influencer in this space? I think probably if you're here, you are, or you're trying to drive forward new technology adoption, or do you feel like everyone is in lockstep? It'd be really interesting to hear your perspective in the chat. Great. So I will keep this open for a little bit longer if anyone wants to keep adding in their perspective. So to go a little bit into what we found, when asked to describe their organization's adoption of new technology, we found that about 18% of participants shared that their speed of adoption depended on that technology solution in question. So if we were to take out that group, we started seeing this bell curve effect. So 25% ranked their speed of adoption, like other organizations sector, right down the middle within that average. Technology adoption is also correlated with digital maturity, which we found very interesting. So most individuals in the group of average adopters ranked their digital maturity at a 5 or above. Only 5% of participants considered their organization to be early adopters of technology. And often using new technologies, they were often using these technologies before other groups. They also tended to be large organizations, going back to the conversation happening in the chat about digital maturity, adoption of resources, the size of your organization. And so we can assume that they are most likely more resourced, those who are saying that they are these early adopters. A further 16% reported that they tend to use technology quicker than average, and these early adopters are much more likely to say that they have a higher digital maturity than others. And so I will share now the findings from us in this group. And I know we have some in the chat and some within the poll, but it seems like, again, we kind of see this 44% of you say depends on technology. I would love for you to explain a little bit and expand on that more in the chat to see what's driving those decisions. And then we're seeing about 40% within that late adoption stage. And some of you are falling within that average adoption, and some are falling within early adopters. And I'm seeing kind of throughout the chat a good number of that depends on the technology, average, and late adoption. Yeah, and which department you might be within as well. So let me bring back our slides quickly. So then we started looking at organizations that see tech adoption as a key lever for value, even if they aren't yet using tech to their fullest potential. So when respondents weighed the focus area that would bring the most value to their current fundraising strategies and operations, the largest groups identified training to help them use technology to the fullest potential. That was around 60%, closely followed by improved data management. We'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second. And integrated technology solutions for seamless collaboration. Digitally limited organizations, those that we're kind of calling tentative testers, see even greater value in training and integration. So I'll pass these over to Sam for a little bit more here as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just important to call out, y'all are participating in BB Dev Days because you want to grow, you want to learn. I think considering how we leverage that technology to be able to drive our organization's strategy forward is really sort of a key part of the story, right? So how do you think about opportunities to maybe extend this into other parts of the organization? And how do you help sort of evangelize for opportunities for your organization to improve its digital maturity? And I think, training, sort of extending that knowledge into other parts of the organization is one of the key levers that you can use to help drive that.
And so now I'd love to open up a
Great.
discussion. Yeah. Lori, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Kate.
Oh, I just wanted to open it up, looking at like what you and Sam would advise people do to get the most of their technology and their tech investment.
Yeah, so I think that we see what in this survey, at least we saw in the US set of data, and I believe we saw the same thing reflected globally, that many organizations feel that they're not getting the maximum value out of their technology. We're also seeing at the same time that the organizations that say that they're getting the most value out of their technology and are testing new technologies in responsible ways are the organizations that have really strong revenue performance. I think there's a really valuable set of comments happening in the chat right now as well around balancing risk. Many of us work in contexts where we all work in contexts where we're dealing with sensitive data. We all work in contexts where we have organizational policies where we need to maintain trust with our constituencies, right? So we've got this continuum of risk and reward that we need to be traversing really carefully as we're considering tech investment. But one of the things I observed during, so all of us as your hosts in this conversation have spent time working in nonprofit organizations. And when I worked in the nonprofit space, one of the things that I observed was that often there was a group of folks who were interested in experimentation and innovation, and there was a group of folks who were responsible for revenue performance. And often there were some silos between those groups. And so because we are seeing the connection between technology and revenue performance, I think my encouragement is if you're someone who's in an organization that's feeling tech averse in a way that you think is holding you back, to create a plan to be more involved in the revenue conversations of your organization. And that can be, it depends on what your role is in the organization, right? If you're earlier in your career and you're not already naturally a part of these conversations, it might mean asking if you can sit in on a meeting, making sure that you're really familiar with what all of the revenue numbers in your annual reports mean. If you're later in your career, maybe this means assigning your team up for a revenue related goal, even if you're adjacent to revenue. So I think there's an opportunity here to pull this connection between tech and revenue together in a way that can help bring down silos in your organization.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I'll just kind of extend on that a little bit, Lori. In the same way that you've been talking about sort of the folks that are deeply involved in the data and the technology side, kind of coming into the fundraising side and really kind of understanding and communicating with that and breaking down some of those silos. I think the inverse is true too, right? In this age of AI, I think it's really expanding the importance of data and how we are properly stewarding, managing, thinking about our data. And really all folks that are working with the organization are really responsible for part of your organization's data strategy, right? I think about some of the challenges that we had sometimes with fundraisers and capturing opportunity data or notes information from conversations with prospects, right? All that is super important. And so I think just tactically finding opportunities to really double down on your data assets, both the quality and the accuracy of those, and really emphasizing the importance of everyone's role in creating and properly stewarding data, I think is a big part of the story. The second thing that I'll lean on comes from my own experience, both as a practitioner and then a consultant, is this importance of kind of change management, right? I'm a big believer in ProSci's ADKAR framework. It's awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement, right? I deeply believe that a big part of the reason that folks are sort of averse to some of these technology changes and maybe even a self-perception of digital maturity comes down to not feeling like they have necessarily the knowledge or the ability to make that transition into the next step. And sometimes that's even informed by a desire or reluctance to move in there. Maybe they're kind of concerned or fearful of what impacts that has to their jobs or to the organization. And so I think there's a great opportunity. Again, some of the experimentation that you all are doing as part of BB Dev Days and in your own work, kind of extending that and talking with folks about your process, right? and encouraging people to really participate and experiment in their personal lives. That's something we've done a ton on our side in the technology space. AI is changing so rapidly, right? And so some of the experimentation that we're doing in the personal side of things is leading into how we think about use cases, opportunities as that technology rapidly changes. So, kind of coming back to that question around desire, knowledge, and ability as a key part of helping that organization make that transition into the future.
Mm. So before we move into our deeper discussion on AI, I just wanted to double click a little bit on what Sam was saying about data health. And we did find that there was a correlation between digital maturity and data health. So those who, and again, this is all self-identified, those who said they had very good data health were more likely to score their digital maturity above average. And this I find very interesting, also from a similar standpoint of what we've been discussing about an awareness of the relationship between data and technology and getting the most out of your tech investment. Of course, like your technology, and particularly AI, is only as good as the data that you feed it. And so I think that when we look at this, and of course, digital literacy is also very important. When we look at this, I think that we're also looking again at that perception of the value of data health and the value of digital maturity, and the correlation between those two as well. But I'll pass things back to Sam for a little bit more on this as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll just kind of double down on that. I mentioned this earlier. The vibe's important, right? How you feel about your organization's maturity, digital maturity, is often a reflection of how you feel about the quality of the data, right? So really spending some intentional time thinking about the quality where you have opportunities to leverage there. And if you aren't feeling mature, the data is a great place to look at as a starting place. Like, what can you be doing in that space to really improve and innovate, particularly to set your organization up for success as we head into this next evolution of where the technology landscape is heading.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this is a good empowerment step for me. And I think for a lot of us, particularly like TPAs and those who are really in the trenches with this data, this is such a great gateway to unlock new potential in your organization. So just wanted to make sure we spent some time discussing this. But now for the topic of the hour, the topic of our lifetime, let's dive into AI a little bit more, and see where you fit in at your organization.
So we asked some questions in this research, and again, I hope you'll all dive deep on the report after we finish this session, because there's more in the report than we can cover in this short amount of time. But there's one of that you'll see in the data that we're about to share. You're here at Dev Days, you are likely experimenting with AI. And one of the things that we all talk about with these experimentation is that we're working to free up our time so that we can do the things that only a human can do, right? That's the ultimate role of AI, is to help humans do the human tasks and to assist us with things humans don't have to do. So before we start looking at the data, I actually want to pause for a moment and give you 30 seconds to just think about, like, what would your day actually look like if you were focused on things that only a human could do, and you had support on the things that could be automated in an even greater way than you do today. What parts of your role would you outsource to clear up that time? Where would you put your focus? How would things feel? Just take a minute and think about that, because I want you to hold that in your mind as we have the next, as we take a look at the data in the next couple slides.
Yeah, absolutely. I know I'm the type of person that sometimes silence is good as you're compiling your thoughts, so we'll give you guys just a little bit of quiet time to jot that down. I think Lori's touching on something that's really important, really thinking about the kind of unique human aspects that we can bring to our work, right? I read a pretty important book a couple of years ago in my own kind of journey called Prediction Machines. It's actually written by a couple of economists that are looking at the economic impact of AI. And one of the ways that they frame it up is in the context of it being a solution that helps remove uncertainty, right? Uncertainty is something that we all deal with on a day-to-day basis in our work. I think about it in the context of a gift officer, right? Sometimes it's a question of who to prioritize in the portfolio or who to talk with, right? And sometimes folks get hung up in that process of making the decision. So if we can reduce some of that friction, right, that opens up all sorts of new opportunities to really sit down and have a conversation with the prospect, which is where we know like the richest conversations come from, right? So, it's important to just kind of keep that in mind as what is the technology sort of designed to do? And then where are the outcomes in our organization that we really want to double down on driving, and where is that technology the right fit? Because at the end of the day, right, technology is a tool. And it's designed for a particular set of uses that we want to make sure we're leveraging it appropriately. So just think there's a ton of opportunity here for us to really lean into the humanness of what we do.
Yeah, I think the idea that technology is a tool is one that we want to hold ourselves to, because it is not the end in and of itself, right? Like the point of using AI isn't to use AI, it is to free up our time to do what only people can do. And what we're observing even in these very early days of watching how organizations are integrating AI, the organizations that are integrating AI into their processes and driving the most effective results are organizations that manage both creative exploration with responsible guardrails and a really clear vision of where they want to go. And you need that clear vision of where they want to go. But what I want to challenge us with in this conversation is that the same is true for us as professionals. Like in this time, AI is going to free up for us time in our day, and that time in our day will be sucked into other things that we did not proactively choose to spend our time on if we are not also really intentional about cultivating our vision for what our time looks like in our day and how we're going to use this to drive breakthroughs through our organizations and our careers. You can actually use, and I've done this myself, an AI tool like ChatGPT, Copilot, or Gemini to help you think through what a vision for your own personal career goals can be when using AI. You can give it a prompt like, I'd like to create a vision statement about how I can use time savings of AI to drive professional breakthroughs for myself. Ask me a series of questions one at a time. Help me identify areas. Help me craft it. That goes without saying. So yeah. And Ben, it's such a great question that you're asking. What are the things that only a human can do? That I think is something that we all need to be introspective about. What are the things that only a human can do? And as a human, what are the things that you are most passionate about doing and believe will drive your organization forward? I think like the key message in this discussion, and we can, I think, even maybe skip some of the, we can discuss whether or not we will have time to get to some of our next questions here. But this is the key element, is like, we can't just let AI happen to us. We need to be crafting a vision for what it looks like for us as people and for our organizations, because it's a tool to help us do other things. It is not an end in and of itself.
Yeah, I think that's I wanted to call out, Sam has dropped the most human as a read that he suggests. And we had a few questions here, and I think all of these somewhat tie together, but I want to encourage you to maybe carry these throughout your day, throughout your week, and really consider them. Particularly, we had a quick kind of chat question. You're welcome to answer these, but I think with our limited time, we're going to dive more into the data and our findings and really get into the meat of it. But when we're thinking about like what is the human work, I think we might need to think about the flip side of this, because I think I want to make sure that you're empowering yourself, thinking about how do you use AI in your personal life and what does that give you? An example of that for me is I every week use AI to organize my grocery list so that I can more efficiently go through the grocery store and my toddler is less likely to have a meltdown at the grocery store. Things like this that have a direct impact on my day and the happiness of my child. But then I think if we look at how do you use AI in your role at work, again, how can you look at these tools as a way to empower yourself, as a way to empower collaboration amongst others, to deepen your relationships with others, I know for those who are donor facing or working specifically with supporters, how do you get time back to get face-to-face with them? So these are all things to just consider as you go through your week, and I just wanted to raise these here. You're welcome to answer them, but I wanted to dive a little bit here. For those who want to take a closer look at the report itself, we've asked you a little bit about, do you use AI within your personal life, your work? How do you rate your digital maturity? These are all, yes, I'm loving seeing these in the chat. So these are all questions that we asked within the survey. And then from there, we were able to identify kind of these 4 different personas. And so as you go through the AI section of the report itself, you'll see these kind of these personas drawn out. So we have optimistic adopters, those who identify themselves as digitally mature AI users. And this is kind of the sentiment that they carried across, that AI is useful, it's a priority for my organization, but that doesn't mean I don't have concerns about it, and it will never fully replace the human touch. So again, this deep awareness of the responsibility that also goes towards the use of AI, the very measured concerns that we should all share with the adoption of new technology, and this awareness of its role to empower human connection and not take it away. And then when we look at open-minded attempters, which if I'm looking at the chat and our polls, I think this is kind of where a lot of us sit. This is the digitally average AI users. They tend to say that AI is the future, but must be used properly. And the struggle for them will be in adoption. Again, this resourcing element as well. And we're looking at 29% of survey participants there. And then our tentative testers are those who were more digitally limited, who put themselves on the lower end of the digital maturity scale, but are still using AI. They tended to find that AI has potential, but it might not be all it's cracked up to be. And we're not ready to realize the benefits now. So there's still some curiosity there. There's still a little bit of, again, we call them tentative testers. They're kind of dipping their toe in the water. They're seeing where things go, but they're not taking the active role here. And then the hesitators are those who do not use AI at this stage. And I want to call out specifically that this is across all digital maturity levels. So we didn't find that those who are more digitally mature are always using AI. This is very much its own separate consideration for the organizations and the individuals that we surveyed. So they tend to find that there might be some benefits overall, but the negatives for them still outweigh the positives. And they're in the smallest percentage here at 18%. Yeah, I love this, Brenda. This is true. I think almost everyone uses AI, but they might not realize it. If you're going into Google and you're searching for something, you are using AI. So I think that the perception of what you classify as AI is important here as well. So as you go through this, I'm curious to see if these resonate with you and where you think that you sit within these. So we did find overall there was a predominant use of AI within fundraising organizations. So 82% of all respondents say that they use AI, and a majority, so 78%, use free to access AI systems, 23% use paid and standalone AI solutions, and then 22% use AI featured into their CRM or integrated into their CRM. Those who are using it for an average of 2 functions within their workflows. Generative AI is the most utilized. I don't think that's going to surprise us at this stage, although I think, especially if you were at the last session, we're going to see that change and that shift with the adoption of with the continued adoption of agentic AI. 59% are using it to draft content for communications and newsletters. 40% are using it to draft for social media. We're seeing an overall 72% of those who use AI are using it for generative purposes. That is followed by virtual assistants and note-taking software at 31%. And then 24% of all respondents who use AI are using it for prospecting. That is predominant with larger organizations, and they're more likely to be taking advantage of that technology. Again, I think there's a lot of correlations there between, of course, your data health. Prospecting relies on good data health, your digital maturity, and your resourcing. And those who do use AI for prospecting are most likely to experience revenue growth. Larger organizations are twice as likely to use predictive AI to understand donor behavior. And this is a use case and that is also more prevalent in those with above average digital maturity. And then we look at asking them about their use over time. A vast majority are using AI tools at a higher rate than they were in the years prior. I think we can see the speed of adoption is just increasing and increasing, but we're definitely at a really interesting influx point right now. This is especially true for content creation and note-taking, but a lesser degree, but still significant for those who are leveraging AI for prospecting, well screening, and A/B testing. So again, I think those who have been dipping their toes in the water of generative AI might be getting a little bit deeper into the capabilities at this point. While still increasing over time, the use of chatbots and predictive donor behavior tools are being adopted a little bit less rapidly, but we do see some growth there as well. And so now I think, of course, we've talked about kind of these measured concerns, and I think concern is the other side of curiosity, and both of those are necessary when you're adopting new technology. So these main concerns are common to each persona, the most being inaccurate output, misinformation, data security, but optimistic adopters are more concerned. So again, optimistic adopters are those high digital maturity AI users are more concerned about security and the loss of the human touch. That is where they are holding the most weight. And it shouldn't come as a surprise that those who don't use AI, those hesitators, are the most concerned. That's what's driving them to kind of take a step back before adopting. They're more concerned about other groups, about data security, bias, reputation, risk, and job security. So to talk a little bit more about this, I'll pass it to Sam.
Yeah, and I think Brenda's bringing up an important point here as it relates to AI. AI is a categorization of sort of an application of technology in a variety of different domains. There's sort of predictive analytics on one end of the AI scale through machine learning, and then there's generative AI and LLMs. And so there's a pretty wide gamut that's going to depend on sort of how you're categorizing AI for a specific use case. But I think it's highlighting one of the important points as it comes to AI is that, for so many of our partners in our organizations, it's really important to work with a trusted partner, right? You want somebody that is coming to the space with an intentionality that is applicable to the fundraising and nonprofit landscape. We here at Blackbaud adhere to the National Institute of Standards and Technology AI Risk Management Framework. So we're really incorporating trustworthiness considerations into the design, development, use, and evaluation of our AI solutions. And we talk a little bit about intelligence for good as part of our story as a company, but it is so important, right? We want to make sure that AI is able to be used in a way that leverages its power, so it's powerful, it's convenient for our customers, and that we're also kind of bringing to bear responsibility as well. We want to make sure, particularly as the regulatory environment changes, right, that we are respecting not just the letter of the law, but the spirit of it as well. And so we feel like we bring a lot to bear in that conversation as you all are looking at the application for your specific organization.
Mm-hmm. And one statistic that I want to call out here when we're talking about, specifically responsible use is that we found that 82% of these fundraisers or users are using AI, and 96% of them have concerns. But we found that only 14% had an AI policy in place. So that is another area that we want to empower you to look into and make sure that you are, moving into this in a way that is responsible. And also, throughout the chat, I can see also, the constant question about what's being done with data, also showing up for your constituents and showing that you really know you can put your money where your mouth is with the security behind their data.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if I can just jump in and add one note, we have like Sam mentioned, a very rigorous, robust AI policy at Blackbaud that creates guardrails for everything that we develop. We have heard, seeing in this data, the low number of organizations that have an AI policy in place. We've been wondering, what can we do to help the social impact space with this need? So if you are an organization that does not have an AI policy in place and you have ideas about a tool or resource that might be helpful to your organization in developing one, or data points that you think would help you make the case to develop one, Kate's going to share an email address in the final slide of our presentation. Please reach out to us at the Blackbaud Institute. We would love to make sure whatever that resources we put out to support this need are grounded in your insights.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that call out, Lori.
I think just to kind of wrap things up, I want to borrow a little bit from a thought that Ethan Mullock shared in his book, Co-Intelligence, and it's sort of a useful thought experiment. he looks at AI and he says there's a couple of different scenarios that this could go. One is that the AI that we're using today is the most capable version of that technology that we're ever going to use. And the book was written about a year ago, so I think we know that that's not so far been the case. But I think an alternative way to look at it is, what if what we're using today is sort of the most immature that the technology is or will be, right? What opportunities open up as we look forward to the future? How can we extend our work? How can we extend the reach of our organizations? What implication does this have for our future? And how do we potentially frame up some of our questions a little bit differently? What does that world look like in the best case scenario? And then how might that transform your organization's ability to really fulfill its mission and vision? I just want to kind of point back to some of the conversation earlier about the resourcing piece, right? We always want more to be able to help our organizations be super successful. And I think there's so much opportunity, and it's such an exciting time to be in the space, both in the social good space, but as well as in the technology space. And so we're just really delighted to be able to partner with you all and to work through this next era together.
Great, thank you all so much. I know that we're a little bit past time, but please reach out to me. I just dropped my email in the chat with any ideas around AI policy or any other just questions or thoughts that come up from this research. So thank you, Lori. Thank you, Sam. And for those who are still here, I am about to push the survey into the chat for you all to take. And just a reminder that there is a prize on the line here. So if you take the survey and you're one of those top participants, then you enter in the running to win a prize. But also just encourage you to keep taking advantage of all of the resources from BB Dev Days and this final day of the conference. We appreciate you all for being here. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much.